Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, a great article by Rebecca Sabky. Check this box if you're a good person. Mark and Anika will discuss Chapter 120, What is the Teach Grant? Our question is bonus content, where Mark shows 14 ways the college admissions may be different for the current juniors due to COVID-19. Our interview is part 4 with Vincent Garcia, understanding the 23 colleges in the California State University system. And there'll be no college spotlight as Vince is going to talk about Cal State.
You know, Dave, you know what I realized just hit me? I really am missing sports, man.
Oh, man.
It's amazing. It's amazing the role sports plays in our culture, isn't it?
You and me both. I mean, as much as we love politics, I am sick of CNN. I am sick of Fox News. I am sick of MSNBC, and I can't take another ESPN 1980 playoff rerun. So yes, we need sports.
You and me both, but I'll tell you what, I think we lost all our sports cred because a couple of weeks ago I did a college spotlight on Arizona.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize this until we got an email that came in from a listener that said, did you know that you called the Pac-12 the Pac-10 the whole time?
Oh, come on. No, that's us. Look, for us old timers, it was always the Pac-10. I don't care how many schools you add. 10 just sounds better than 12.
Yeah, Utah and Colorado got added in 2012. And so this response came from a resident of one of those two states. So I'd probably, hey, what are you doing excluding me, man?
Okay, well, look, all apologies to all our folks in Utah and Colorado. But until you win a national championship, you ain't an honorary member of our Pac-10 yet.
Okay, Dave. You're stepping on toes, man.
I know. We have to go back to politics. Talking about sports, that's the third rail.
Okay, there we go. Listen, congratulations to Lauren, who's now officially a sophomore. Joy, who's a senior.
Yeah.
And then Lauren finished up, I think on the 5th and Joy on the 6th. They're back to back. And yeah. I don't know about you, but Joy thought the work was more rigorous at home. The teachers piled the work on even more than when she was at school. Was that Lauren's experience or not?
Well, what was Lauren's experience was that I think she really didn't like taking classes at home. What she really,
right.
This is a great suggestion for a podcast because she actually volunteered. She would like to talk about the differences between online and in-class learning. And she truly thought that there was a deficit to not having other kids in school, in the classroom experience, not having the discussion and not feeding off the interactions and the responses of your peers. So this might be unique to her, but I think that she would conclude that she would much rather have the in-class experience. I think she learned what she had to know.
Well, I think everybody's feeling that.
Yeah,
I think everybody's feeling that, but I'll tell you what, I do like the idea of having her come on the podcast and talk about that. I think our listeners would like that. They get to know your daughter.
Yeah.
Maybe we can throw in a few questions about her Yale experience. Let's talk about that. Maybe even, who knows, maybe we'll have to do an interview with both of them or, we'll figure it out. I think there's something in there our listeners might like.
Yeah. And my contribution is paying $80,000 to have your kid do college in her pajamas. That's my perspective.
I mean, knowing my friend over here will push Lincoln off the penny, man. I can't think of anything that could be more painful than that. I mean, already the $80,000 is a big nut to swallow, but for you, my friend, it probably feels like double that.
That's right. I was thinking in my mind, refund. I want a refund.
Well, I got to give you credit, man. You let me go back 30 and 40 years and crack on you, man, and you take it as a good sport. So,
man.
But I know what goes around comes around, so I'm getting ready for some stories when I was 10 and 12 popping up here every now and then as well.
Well, I already sent an email blast to Andrew and Michael and Norm and said, hey, man, bring up the anecdotes. so they're
first-time listeners. Our first-time listeners. Dave's got two brothers, Michael and Andrew. I've got a brother, Norm, and all five of us are like probably within 3 or 4 years in age. So we're like the five amigos growing up, all of us. So you see Dave and I in here, but we were like a fivesome, and so there's a lot of ammunition there, man.
There's a lot.
Listen, I wanted to say something. A lot of people have heard of the CARES Act. But what they may not know is 50% of the money that colleges got from the CARES Act has to go to students. Now, this will benefit our listeners who already have a kid in college. And what you may not realize is your child does not have to be Pell Grant eligible to receive that money. And the reason I know that is, you don't know this, Dave, but my own daughter filed a CARES Grant student application at the University of Georgia, and she gets $500 back.
Wow. How'd you do that?
She got $500 because the way the application is written, it asks you, have you encountered any hardships as a result of coronavirus?
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I lost my job at the mall because it's not, the stores were closed. And I live off campus in an apartment and I have to pay well, she's not paying it, I'm paying it.
Yeah.
But we have to pay rent and we're not getting a refund because I'm not on campus. They gave her $500. So this is just, and I'm mentioning that because there's a lot of schools are still processing applications.
Right.
So if you've got a child in school, then you need to look into that because, a lot of times it will require a FAFSA submission.
Yeah.
But for the most part, every school establishes their own policy and they're pretty much looking at the question of, did you encounter hardship? And I've been looking at the stats, Dave, and they're some schools might have 5,600 applicants and like 3,900 are getting it.
Yeah.
So it's something it's not that hard to get. So just want to pass that on for any of our listeners who have a kid in college already.
Well, this is definitely something you need to put, my brother, on the show notes. Okay. Because give the link. That is a very, very helpful, practical tip. In these hard times, anytime you can get $500 is $500. So in all seriousness, Mark, put it in the show notes because I'll be checking out those show notes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You know what? That's a good idea. I will put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
In fact, you know what I'll even do? I'll put a link to the article that we were going to discuss in the news. So if anybody wants to read it, they can even get more details than that. So That's what I'll do. I think that's a good idea, Dave.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about the Teach Grant too, which could be another about almost $3,800. So
yeah,
listen to the Your College Bound Kid podcast and put a little money in your pocket.
Yes. And coming from Mr. Co-host Kick Lincoln off the penny, I'm all for it. So
you guys think I'm kidding, man. It's one day we should do the top 10 countdown, like Letterman, whatever he used to do.
That's right.
Dave's cheapest moments, man. You're not frugal. You're parsimonious, niggardly, all of it. That's you, my friend.
Well, you know what?
But I have some of that in me too, so I can't be too critical.
It's coming from the brother who says, man, you just can't buy a market order. You have to make it a limit. And I'm like, Mark, it's a difference of $2, Oh, but I got the stock at 41 and you got it at 43. I'm like, man, it's $2. We only bought 2 shares. You saved yourself all of the, I'll buy you the latte, brother. Just buy the stock at the market. Mark will be like, oh, Dave, you could have saved $2 if you had made it a limit order. It was going to go down further.
You got to count the number of shares you're buying too. It's not just one share.
Look, I got my 4 shares of Tesla, and if I got it and I saved $20, well, I'll treat you to lunch, my brother.
Okay. You paid $2,400 for Amazon. I got it for $1,756. That was $750 savings. But we'll move off of that.
Oh, since you reminded me of that, you're paying lunch. Okay.
So listen, big announcement, friends. Very, very excited about this. I was talking with Dave, and I was like, Dave, I would love for you to do a college spotlight once a month. And here's why. I said, there are campuses in this country that you have been on more than I've been on. First of all, let's talk about the schools that you went to, Princeton and Harvard. Let's talk about where Lauren is, Yale. But not just the highly selectives. Dave's in Chicago, so he can talk about Loyola. He can talk about DePaul. He can talk about Illinois and Chicago. Dave's sister went to Pratt. He can talk about Pratt. He's been on that campus. And Dave more into Canadian schools than me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Glad you corrected that.
That's right. Because she listens to
Parsons.
Yeah.
I was confused. Pratt and Parsons. I knew that. She went to Parsons School of Design. Yeah. Parsons School of Design. So, sorry, Kim. I knew that. My bad. And then Canadian schools. Dave's a lot more into Canadian schools than me. Both his brothers went to Western, University of... Did Anne go to University of Toronto? I can't remember where she went for undergrad.
She went to University of Toronto.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So Dave's oldest sister went to University of Toronto. He grew up in Toronto.
Yeah.
The University of Chicago is like a stone's throw away from Dave's house. He can almost throw a stone and hit that place.
I did my residency
there. That's why you'll hear him reference you Chicago a lot, because even then he got another degree from Northwestern. Chicago. How far is Chicago from your house, Dave? 2 miles?
Not even. No, it's about 6 blocks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. 6 blocks. 6 blocks. So how many times have you been on that campus? Not to mention the school your daughter went to is a feeder right in there.
Right.
So we got a bunch of schools that Dave can do. So once a month, we're going to have him do a college spotlight, and I provide a little training for him. So to get the information, including information sessions that he's going to attend. So, I learned something in grad school. It's not what you know, it's what you know how to find. So I just kind of showed Dave where I get all my information from, and he's already a smart guy. So excited to be able to have a little new twist in there coming up for you guys.
Well, it's an opportunity to convince someone to go to my alma mater, Princeton, which I love dearly, because I failed miserably with my daughter, but that's another story.
So when Dave does Princeton, I'm sure you'll hear the details. He tried really, really, really hard to get his daughter to go to Princeton. And it was 2 against 1. Frida was saying no. Lauren was saying no. And Dave was calling me, complaining all the time. I'll let him talk about that when he does his Princeton one.
I got no love. I got no support. And I to this day, I tell my daughter, it's like Marlon Brando, on the waterfront. It's like, you could have been a contender. And I told her, you could have been a tiger, but now I have to settle for a dog. But that's another story.
Yeah. But we're going to mix it up. It's not just going to be the highly selectives like the Princetons and the Yales and the Chicagos and the Harvards, but a lot of schools right in Chicago and others that he knows about. And like I said, he's much more into the Canadian schools than me, so it'll be good for him to mix some of them in there. So I think you're going to enjoy that. Speaking of which, I can't tell you guys how helpful it is when you complete our survey, and we haven't brought it up in months. But just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, look under the About Us tab, and you'll see a survey link. We, Dave, Anika, and I, we read every one of these surveys, and we take to heart what you say. And guess what? Don't worry about hurting our feelings. We can handle the truth.
That's right.
So give us the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's how we learn what we're doing well. It's how we learn what needs to change. Our admissions tip. All right. Once again, I feel bad that I didn't give a lot of this appealing aid award stuff earlier, because a lot of the seniors have deposited, but we have a lot of juniors and sophomores who can use this, and there are over 400 schools that have extended deadlines to June 1st. If you are doing a competitor-based appeal, last week we talked about need-based versus competitor-based versus merit-based versus the general appeal. If you're doing a competitor-based appeal for more money, be sure to share the other offers that you received in writing. Send them over. Your case will be stronger if you show how others evaluated you differently in writing as opposed to telling them that. So that's just an admissions tip there. And admissions vernacular. Dave, I think you may know this one because I know you and I have talked about this off air. Well lopsided. Well lopsided. You want to take a shot at that one?
Whoa. Well lopsided? Oh, I think they replaced this term with angular admissions. Is this correct? So well lopsided is where...
now you're really flexing your muscles.
Yeah.
So angular and well lopsided are synonyms. And you want to explain that to our listeners?
Sure. When we went to school, people talked about the well-rounded student, and that shifted over the years to focus on the student who was more of a specialist, a student who showed a certain gift or proficiency in one particular field or study or interest. So I think well lopsided refers to that particular student. I think we now refer to that student in many terms as an angular student. They have an angle, or they're tilted to one particular skill set. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you think about well-rounded, it's kind of the opposite of that. Well-rounded, you're very good at a lot of things, but not necessarily stand out in one. Renaissance man, Renaissance woman. Well, lopsided is having one thing you went really, really, really deep in, and a school can see that, oh, if this kid comes into our student body, they may be whatever. And this could be in both academic or non-academic areas. This could be like, I remember when I was at Harvard this last summer, and the dean of admissions would talk about how we flag the kid that's the absolute math genius in the class, the group of them, because we keep winning the math competitions and we want to continue to win these math competitions. And this is a kid that could be on our math competition team.
Yeah.
And so that's something in that area. Once again, colleges are looking for both well-rounded and well-lopsided kids, both. But it is easier to stand out at the most selective schools if you have something that they can see you're bringing in, where you'll be one of the most excellent people in the student body, and they can see immediately where you'll make your contributions. That's a lot.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Dave. Long intro today. Take it away. We have this article today, which I'm super excited about. Before you do the intro, Dave, I'm going to tee something up on here. This article is one where, Dave initially said, I didn't like this article as much as you did. And so one of the things that Dave and I have learned is let's have our conversations about this on the air, because they're more natural, because we'll have a 30-minute conversation about that. And then when we go to do it on the air, it's not the same. It feels like you watch the TV show and then you turn around and watch it again like 2 hours later. So I'm curious to hear what Dave says, because I absolutely love this article. I want to hear what maybe didn't move you about it. But why don't you start by giving a description of it, and then we'll get into it.
Excellent. This was an interesting article. My objections to it we'll talk about that in a second. But the article was by a Rebecca Sabky, and she is a Dartmouth admissions officer who admits to reading over 2,000 applications a year from students all over the world. And it was called Check This Box If You're a Good Person. And she starts off the article with an anecdote where she's visiting a college. She gives one of her admission spiels. She goes to the cafeteria, and as she's walking down the hallway, a student runs after her, taps her on the shoulder, and says, "You dropped your granola bar, and I know you're going to need it as a snack, so I just wanted to give it to you." And with a big smile, he hands her the granola bar, and then without another word, he turns around and melts back into the crowd. And what really impressed her about this particular interaction was it showed a random act of kindness, one I guess that she hadn't seen for quite some time. And it brought her back to what she found was the most significant recommendation letter she's had in her career. In fact, in this recommendation letter, she said in her 15 years of admissions, seeing over 30,000 applications, she's never had this particular type of recommendation letter. And the letter of recommendation was from a school custodian. That's a euphemistic way of saying the janitor. And a student actually had a janitor write his recommendation letter. But what made this letter so impactful in the minds of Sabky was that this janitor recounted in very simple yet elegant terms that this was a student that knew the names of every member of the janitorial staff, that every night took the time to clean the empty rooms before he left, that did little things like thanked the hallway monitor and tidied up after his peers, and that, quote, had a refreshing respect for every person in the school, no matter who his station or his title. And to her, these two interactions represented a quality that is so difficult to pinpoint in applications filled with stellar SAT scores, amazing extracurriculars, and recommendation letters that span from presidents to kings to every type of luminary imaginable. And she ends the article by saying things that, quote, until admission committees figure out a way to effectively recognize the genuine but intangible personal qualities of applicants, we must rely on little things to make the difference. So let me end here, Mark. There's a little bit more she says, but that's a primer. What was your thoughts on the article?
Yeah, I absolutely love this article, and just a bit more context. So this article appeared in the New York Times in 2017. So rarely do Dave and I go back 3 years and pull an article out like this from 2017. The podcast actually started February 2018, but I want to do it for a lot of reasons. One of them is this has kind of become a famous article in college admission circles. I won't be surprised if you're listening, if you're a parent of a sophomore, junior, or freshman, if at some point you hear in an information session an admissions officer say, Google, check this box if you're a good person. I want you to read that. That's often a time something that admissions officers will tell students because it's so powerful. And so this article, it just resonated with me in so many ways. And let me go into them. I'll tell you why I loved it so much. And then I'm really curious, Dave, what it was that you found a little lacking. And so, but let's talk about that after I tell you why I loved it so much. First of all, students think it's all about objective criteria like grades, AP scores, and test scores. And they think a lot of times, like, you're not going to believe this. James Jackson had a 34 on the SAT and he didn't get in. And Maya Perkins, I'm making names up, by the way. So if that's your name, just know I'm just making names up at the blue as I go, had a 30 and she got in. What's up with that? That's messed up. This is like how people think. And so here's an article that's underscoring it's not just about scores, not just about grades, not just about test scores and AP scores. That stuff is necessary to convince a school that you can handle their rigorous program. Every school's got their own research on numbers that make them nervous, that they think you're unlikely to be able to be successful. But it's not just about that. So that's the first thing. Kind of a twin to that is that character really matters. It matters to some schools more than others. I know, where my oldest daughter, Kirsten, went to Davidson, which was required all 4 years for you to live on the dorms. So some schools are more residential, and the more residential ones are going to really focus on that. But even the ones that are more commuter schools, they're really looking for people of substance and character, and it's so important. And it's contagious. It has a powerful impact on everybody. And then another reason why I just love this article is because there really is a tendency out there amongst applicants to think that the way that you impress an admission officer is by looking at all the VIPs in your life and saying, oh man, like maybe I can get the CEO of this company to write a recommendation letter for me. And I remember on the admission side being that way and getting these letters from senators and getting these letters from VIP people. And I'll never forget, I'm not going to mention the name of the teacher, but we had both faculty, readers, and admission officers that were on our admissions committee. Some colleges are set up that way, some are not. And I remember one English teacher who was on the committee, just blood was boiling. Like, how dare you think that you can flatter us with the name of this person who wrote this clearly impersonal letter, more about how they knew your dad than they knew you. And they think that stuff impresses us, and it just doesn't. And students are always trying to do the little things that they think impressed. So here's a quote from the article. When I give college information sessions at high schools, I'm so used to being swarmed by students. Usually, as soon as my lecture ends, they run up, hand me their resumes, fighting for my attention, so they can tell me about their great internships or their great summer science programs. Everyone's trying to impress. And so there's a thinking like that is what makes you stand out. When colleges really do value kindness, they really value that. And to have somebody who was impressed enough and respected a janitor enough to put them in charge, in a sense, of their application and put their fate in the hands of that person. It's just so refreshing when everyone else is always trying to get all these VIPs all the time. And then for what that janitor said about the student, it just, college admissions people, they go into this work because they love kids and love their school. And a lot of times it's almost more the kids than the school. That's why they can move around from one school to another and be fine with this if they're helping kids. And this is a kind of a trait that's going to be valued. Character really, really, really matters. And I think admissions people, they feel like they may say that, but people don't necessarily believe it. And this is such a powerful way of showing like, yeah, it really, really matters. So I guess just because it's so different than what everybody else tries to do. And it also, another thing, it also shows the power of what a recommendation letter can bring. So those are some of the reasons why I liked it, Dave. What are your thoughts? And what was it that made you think it was a little frustrating?
Well, first of all, I thought the point she made was excellent. I thought the letter was excellent. But unfortunately, we live in a cynical society, a cynical world. And so I think the point of the letter would be lost in that the character she's talking about is internal. It's what you are. It's what you have inculcated since kindergarten. And I'm going to segue later on to a poem about all you really needed to know you learned in kindergarten. And so my thought was that if you truly have the qualities of kindness and compassion and sensitivity to others and a caring, it's things that you would have taken into high school and will manifest in everything you do and in every interaction you have with people. It's not going to be manifested in an extracurricular. It's not going to be manifested in the choice of a major, the courses you take, but it will then show up in every recommendation that you have, because that same character will be reflected with the interactions with your biology teacher, your janitor, and so forth. In the last couple of years, though, what we found is a flood of people trying to prove their kindness by finding just the right extracurricular to prove that there's this amazing person. So I remember, for example, in college, I went on a mission. And 25 plus years ago, going on a mission was sort of this unique and interesting thing. Well, Mark, you can you marked that the mission trip has been so overused and so commercialized and so exploited, because there's literally organizations out there that for $10,000 will get the best mission trip your kid ever went on. So, and she even marked that after this article, I'm sure I'm going to get a flood of people getting recommendations for janitors. So my point I'm trying to make is that don't miss the part of the article that there's some extracurricular, some unique thing you need to do to show your kindness. The reality is work on your character and be kind, be compassionate, be sensitive. And in doing all those things, your character will shine out in everything else that you do and be reflected in people's responses to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds like, Dave, you didn't just like the article. It's more that you don't want people to misinterpret what the point of the article is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Bingo.
So, yeah, because I'll mention
winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah. Winner, chicken dinner. I'll mention something to our listeners. So, Dave and I, sometimes we'll talk about this stuff through the week, and we'll be having these great conversations, and I'll be thinking, man, I wish we were recording this. And then sometimes we'll come back and we'll actually discuss it again on the podcast. And it just falls a little flat on the podcast compared to the first conversation. And so a lot of times Dave knows I'm like, he starts talking about these things. I'm like, no, let's not talk about it now. I want it to be real. So we're going to record it. So we don't do a lot of talking back and forth before, because we just want that complete, authentic conversation. And I'll tell you where some of this came out of, Dave. It came out of, I was giving you a little bit of feedback on the very first time or two when you came on, like episode 105 and 106. I think I said, Dave, I noticed a big improvement in you by 107. And then you said something that was pretty profound. You said, you know what? In episode 105 and 106, I was just thinking, I'm on a podcast. I'm trying to do everything right. And then by 107, I realized, the key to podcasting is just having a conversation. Remember when you told me that?
That's correct. That's why actually podcasting when you're sort of a little tired but feeling relaxed is the best way, because you're just enough disinhibited to forget that you're in front of the microphone, and just enough with it just to have a relaxed conversation. It's like Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith on Inside the NBA. Going back to sports.
Hey, there you go. That's something I missed, by the way, right there.
Where's Charles Barkley?
Well, and
by the way, are you Charles and am I Kenny? So I'm just thinking.
I guess so, because unfortunately or fortunately, I've had many people over the years tell me, you look like Charles Barkley. So I guess I need to be Charles.
I'll be Kenny.
You look closer to Kenny.
That's right. We don't know who Shaq is.
I got a few LBs on you too.
That's right.
Yeah, I know who Shaq is. But speaking of which, Dave, I meant to ask you earlier. Once again, you just finished working the graveyard shift. You're in New Jersey again. We used to record our podcast on your couple days in Chicago, but I was cutting into Frida and Lauren time. So now we record them when you're on the road. Hey, Dave, I know you had a couple more points about this article you wanted to hit on. Want to share one or two of them?
Yeah. So I want to finish up. I think the article was an amazing point that character counts. But I want to actually take the counterpoint, is that just as evidence of kindness shows out, so does evidence of meanness. And I want to give a warning to all the students out there that, especially with social media, it's so much easier to find evidence of your meanness that can counteract all the great kindness that you ever did. I was talking to Lauren, and every year now I call them peer revenge outings, where kids get into these exclusive schools, and when they're already accepted, something that they posted on their social media is brought to the attention of the college admissions committees. Maybe they appeared in blackface, maybe they made a racial slur, maybe they participated in bullying, maybe they had inappropriate political views, and it jeopardizes their college admissions. So just as kindness to the janitor can really help, the reverse is your character can show out by the meanness that you show on a day-to-day basis. So just be careful out there. It cuts both ways. Any thoughts, Mark?
Well, I wanted to say something on that, Dave.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with Logan Powell, who is Dean of Admission at Brown, about this exact topic. And he said he was talking to a group of us who are counselors and telling us to make sure that we tell our students how important this is, because he went a step further. He said, for every person who's excited that you're in Brown, there's somebody else that's not excited. And they remember those pictures of that compromising situation you put yourself in at the party. And guess what he said? They send them to us. And now we're forced with a dilemma, like we can't ignore what we just saw. Those racial slurs or whatever it was, the meanness that you showed to women. And so in the video clips that we get. So that's, that's just underscoring your point. But, I also want to go back to what you said before, Dave, which is, and it was an important reminder. Okay. as the author of the article said, okay, now we're going to get a bunch of letters from janitors, his college admission letters, right? Like, the lesson from this should not be, how can I try to replicate, how should I try to fabricate my kindness so that now that I know that kindness counts? Because the college admissions game is a high stake game. And as soon as people find out something matters, they create constructs to try to underscore that strength. So that's not the point, because the point is admissions officers are very, very good at being able to discern genuineness from pretense. And sometimes it's through the recommendation letters. Sometimes it's through the interactions. This article talked about, it said, you may not realize this, but how you treated your parent when you were in our admission office or the information session, that may count more than your standardized test scores, because we remember that, positive or negative.
Right.
And, or what you said to the tour guide, how you treated the tour guide. And so the point is, your authentic self will come out. It really will come out in this process. I remember I was at a panel. This is like probably 9 years ago.
Yeah.
It stood out to me. It was a guy named Matthew. I won't say his last name, but he was a college admissions officer at Occidental College. And somebody asked the question. They said, what do you know now that you didn't realize you were going to know before you took this job? And that was a really good question.
Yeah.
And his answer was, he said, we know everything about you. I had no idea how much information we were going to know about students.
Correct.
By the time we read all of these different recommendation letters, we hear your essays, these personal reflective essays that we ask you to write on. Obviously, we have our, your transcript and the courses that you've taken, your summer activities, your resumes and your interviews and all of that. We know so much about you. And the point is, sort of who you are does come out.
It really,
and
it
so
really does.
an attempt to fabricate is usually ineffective. So any other thoughts, Dave, or do you want to put a bow on it?
I want to put a bow on it by reading a poem, if you would indulge me, Mark. And,
Dave, read a poetry on
me. The poetry, Now, I didn't do well in English, folks. I wasn't much for Shelley and Keats, and I'm certainly no Robert Frost. But sometimes poems stick with me. And this one is an old one. I had to look it up on the internet, but I remember that phrase that all I really needed to know I learned in kindergarten, Mark? You ever remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So it started by a gentleman, Robert Fulghum. He actually wrote a poem, and I just want to read this poem. I think it's apropos. It says, all I really
bonus content on your college kid, you're getting poetry.
Right. That's right. All I really needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. All I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some, and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic. Hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup. The roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we are all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. So do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books, and the first word you ever learned, the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics and equality and sane living. And it ends with, and it is still true, no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it is best to hold hands and stick together. So just a little bit of homespun wisdom that I think applies to everything we do, including college applications.
That was really good, man.
So
this is like, you're taking your podcast game to the next level. I think we're going to be asking for poetry like once a month, man. We need some day poetry.
Don't get used to it, folks. You've exhausted my supply.
but how apropos.
That's as good as it gets.
How apropos. And I think that there's something that college admissions officers frequently talk about amongst themselves is kindness. You know, a lot of times I'll describe it as likability, and how important likability is in the admission process. Likability can be extremely important. A student that teachers just absolutely love to teach. You know, I'll say this as an aside. In addition to doing college placement, I also do boarding school placement. I've sent over 100 kids to 60 different boarding schools, just in the last 10 years. And the thing that I learned after sending all these kids and looking back and seeing who does extremely well, the question that for me will tell whether a kid will do extremely well in boarding school is this the kid that teachers loved to teach? It just encompasses everything. Because if you love to teach the student, they're usually responsible, they're usually motivated, they usually have a love of learning, they're bringing something to the classroom, they're helping others. But it takes in all those character traits and all those character qualities as well. The same thing applies to college. The teacher the kid loves to teach, that's a kid that's going to do well almost every single time. You know, and what we're talking about here are these factors. And what admissions officers frequently talk about amongst themselves is the kindness factor when you're looking at an application, especially if schools are in residential communities. Schools are thinking about how is this kid going to impact his roommate, the person across the hall? What kind of conversations will he or she have or in the dining room, you know, and extracurriculars, if they're in a fraternity or sorority or clubs that they're in? Is a teacher going to enjoy interacting with this student, whether they play an office visit or their contributions in class? That's an intangible that is highly, highly, highly prized. I always have to say this because there are a lot of colleges out there, universities, particularly larger ones, that do admissions by the numbers and are just crunching scores and grades. But for all the other schools that are not in that category, cannot underestimate the value and the importance of kindness. Dave, this was kind of nice having a non-COVID article for once in the last 2 months.
It really was. It really was. And, you know, let's dovetail back to what we said we missed about sports. What I miss about sports is it's a distraction from the unkindness that we see all around us. I can't watch cable television anymore, whether it's Fox or whether it's CNN or regardless of your political persuasion. The thing that strikes me is how mean and how unkind and how distrustful and how suspicious we have become in this society. And it is a disease. It's a virus. Yes, it's infecting everything we do. And I look at our response to COVID, for example. It is disjointed, it's disconnected, it's uncoordinated, it's suspicious, it's untrustful. We neither have the government controls of China or the social cohesion of Sweden to make this whole social distancing work. We are opening up in an uneven pattern all around. There is no consensus on testing. There is no consensus on work rules or so forth. And ultimately, this is going to point to a failure not only of us to control this virus, but to actually succeed in the future. And it all boils down to that we don't have the kindness as individuals to trust one another, to each person do the right thing. And so if we can inculcate the qualities of kindness in kids from kindergarten, going into college, and if it's reflected in their college essays, what this person understood is it's the most important quality of all. It trumps your SAT scores. It trumps your extracurriculars, because without kindness, we as a society will not succeed. And the last thing I'd like to say, for all you struggling students out there who know how tough life is, there are college admission counselors who are looking at the kid who takes on that second job after school to help out with the family finances, who's one of 6 kids who has to spend 2-3 hours of her day looking after their younger siblings, who may be caring for an elderly parent, whose job might be helping to change the bed sheets for the grandmother or the infirm. All these things that show your character but are not necessarily reflected in your extracurriculars. And my plea to you is make that apparent in your personal statement. Make that apparent when they talk about all the extra things you do, because people are paying attention. And those tangible signs of your kindness and your compassion every day are being noted.
Well said.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
So, Anika, this is probably the longest time in quite some time that you've had Naya at home, Jalen at home, or is Jalen in New York?
No, we got him a long time ago. Yeah,
they've both been home for a while.
Yes, we've been a full family for quite a bit, like normal style.
Yeah. So have you noticed any changes in your kids now that they're like back for like 3 months?
No, I talk to them so much. We weren't so disconnected, even with them being apart. So they're pretty much the same. They're a little junkier than I remember them to be, but
because I see changes with Joy. So, we started, like, I got both Karis and Joy cars when they were 20, but when they're 21, they had to pay their own gas. So I noticed, like, she's used to living on her own. Like, she's in an apartment, she cooks, she shops, she cleans, she bakes, she does all that. And now she's like learning to appreciate the value of money more. Like, like this is great because I don't charge her to stay here. She has a few chores, but I don't charge her. And so I'm noticing like starting to have more appreciation for all the stuff her parents did now that she's gone.
Look at that.
So it's all good. I'm enjoying having her home.
Awesomeness.
So today we are in the big 120. Getting up there, Anika.
Yes, we are.
And I'm excited today because we're talking about something that I think a lot of people haven't heard of from my experience. For first-time listeners, I wrote a book called 171 Answers, and the subtitle is To the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And basically, I just take frequently asked questions that I get from students I've worked with and parents and turned each question into a chapter. And so this is the part of our podcast where we go chapter by chapter through my book. And this chapter today looks at what is the Teach Grant and who is it good for? So, Anika, you've read the chapter. Want to give a summary and make some comments and ask me any questions you have?
Well, first of all, I'm one of those people. I had not heard of the Teach Grant.
You and 99% of others, maybe 99.5.
So we're talking, which is an acronym, and it's the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education.
I will not be saying that in that form again.
I will be saying Teach Grant from here henceforth. Yeah, so obviously, naturally, that these are specifically for people who are committed to teaching. And this one is very specific in that they are people who commit to teaching low-income students. And it even gets to be very specific.
There's one other thing, Anika. So teaching low-income / under-resourced students. And do you remember the other one? It's the second category.
Well, I know it's in certain in certain subject areas too, where the demand isn't, there for high quality teachers, which is very interesting.
Yeah. So it has to, the other thing is what they call a high need field. A high need field, meaning there's, there's a dearth of teachers with certain skill sets. And so in order to incentivize people to go into teaching, there's a special grant if people will either commit to work in a under-resourced neighborhood, school district, which is also in a neighborhood, or in a high-need field. But go ahead. You got your mojo going. I'm just cutting you off. Go ahead.
Well, no, now that you mentioned that, because one thing that I had a question about, you said that they have to commit to teaching low-income students in elementary and high school, but you didn't mention middle school. Was that, you just didn't mention it, or is that a thing? Like they don't have to teach middle school students?
I know middle school is also available. Certainly it's available for the high need areas for sure. Because I've looked at that and I've looked at the grades for the high need areas. So I'm pretty sure it's also true for under-resourced and needy middle schools as well. I might have just omitted that. Because I know for sure the high need areas is definitely middle school and high school, and it can also be elementary.
Okay. Well, one thing I was kind of pleased to see is that like you just can't jump up and a student that's making a 2.0 grade point average and just say, hey, I want to be a teacher and I'm going to get this grant. So they do have some qualifications around it, which is
You want to talk about what they are?
Yeah. So just that the GPA has to be, you have to have at least a 3.25.
Correct.
And then also that you have to be in the 75th percentile in one portion of your standardized test, whether it's the ACT or the SAT. You want to drill down on that a little bit more? Yeah.
So now, if you have the 3.25, then you don't need to hit the test score.
Oh, really? Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So they make sure that this is someone who, has got a pretty good GPA.
So what about the 75th percentile? Like, what do you...
Yeah, so that's a test score. That's a test score requirement.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the GPA, then you don't need to have the test. It's not both and.
So are you saying, okay, so if I'm in the 75th percentile on my verbal section and not my math section, does that mean I'm going to teach verbal? Like I'm going to be English language arts teacher or?
No, they don't get that specific like that.
Okay.
So they have the overall qualification of the GPA, but that they don't make you say, therefore you need to be a teacher in this area because you scored higher on your verbal. If you if you hit that test score requirement, then you hit it. And then it's kind of up to you to pick which major you want to pursue, what subject area of specialization.
Gotcha. Okay. So, of course, you got to complete the FAFSA. All of these, you got to complete the FAFSA and be eligible for student aid was one thing that you pointed out. And then the college that you attend must participate in this program. So if I'm going to ABC College in New York, then ABC College must be involved with the Teach Grant program, basically.
Correct. And this is why you listen to Your College Bound Kid, listeners, because if you're a parent of a student interested in teaching, this could be $16,000 right there for you that you will learn about by listening to our podcast.
And you say 16 because it's up to $4,000 per year.
Correct. But it's not like 4,000 is the big number these days. Anika, last week FSCOG was 4,000.
Right.
But the difference with FSCOG is it's a range from 100 to 4,000. Some schools don't even give anything more than 1,000 or 2,000. I mean, every school establishes their own policy. This is different. If you qualify for it and you have a need, you will get the 4,000.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, you will get it.
And then the only last thing I noted on here, Mark, is that another requirement is that you have to participate in a counseling session every year. And I'm assuming, does that mean every year of your college career or every year of you being well, and I don't know if we even mentioned this, that you have to commit to teaching 4 years to the low income students. You have to do it at least for a period.
Yeah, that's
of 4
really
years.
important.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to commit to teaching for 4 years out of the first 8 after you finish your program, either in the high need area socioeconomically or a high need area, meaning the discipline where there's a dearth of teachers. So you have to do that within the first 8 years. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. For example, if you're drafted to military service, you can have a suspension of the clock. You can also have a suspension of that 8-year requirement to do the 4 within 8 if you go on and get a graduate degree. So that delays the clock for you as well.
Okay.
But you do need to apply for this, and you need to apply for it every year. And so so that's the question you have. So every year you need to apply for it. And you need to talk to your financial aid office at your school to see what steps are, because this is different. So FSCOG and Pell and Federal Direct, subsidized, unsubsidized, Parent Plus loans, those things are going to automatically show up on your aid award if you have a need. But the Teach Grant is not going to show up automatically. You're going to have to, talk to your financial aid office, find out the policies, say that you're interested in teaching. And then every school individually also has a little bit of leeway as to the programs of study at their school that are Teach Grant eligible. So it can vary a little bit from one school to the next, what programs they deem as Teach Grant eligible, meaning what majors or courses of study.
All right. Okay.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
So my last question, Mark, is, okay, so you got to do these 4 years. So if I'm an aspiring, let's say I want to be a teacher, but I want to be at the college level, I can still apply for this grant. I just still have to commit to teaching those, those those lower grade levels for the 4-year period. Then I can go on to my other goals, basically. Is that
so you're saying if
your
goal eventually was to be a teacher at the college level, could you still get this as long as you put your 4 years of time in?
Right.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. And let me just go over what some of these high need area fields are, because that's important. So it's definitely bilingual education, English language acquisition, math, reading specialist, foreign language, science, and special education. And then it's any other field that has been identified as a high need field by the federal government, state government, or local educational agency. And there's a publication every year that comes out. It's called the Teacher Shortage Area Nationwide Listing. You just put that in Google, Teacher Shortage Area Nationwide Listing, and it will show you which fields are, you know what? I'll put a link in the show notes, Anika. Remind me to put this in the show notes.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just do my recommended resource on it. I'll get it in there somehow.
We're going to get you all the information.
No, because this could be $16,000 for somebody,
Yeah, that's true.
that they're not going to get if they know about this and then they apply for it. It's important. It's important that they know this stuff.
That's kind of a big
Did I answer your question? Because I feel like I just went off on left field on a tangent.
No, you did. I think, yep, it's all Gucci.
Now, there is one other thing to know. So, Mr. Walsh, who is the director of financial aid at Emory, where Jalen is going, one of the most accomplished and gifted and talented financial aid directors. He's in hot demand as a public speaker because he's very funny and very knowledgeable as well. He's a bit Davidson, by the way. He went from Davidson to Emory. Anyway, he's coming on our podcast later, but he has a name for the Teach Grant. And it's a little pejorative because he's a financial aid director. So he calls the Teach Grant the Teach Groan. And when he talks about it, he groans.
Oh, why?
The reason why is because a lot of times people, of course, they want to get the Teach Grant because they think they want to be teachers. But do you remember what I said happens if you end up not putting in those 4 years of service?
Oh, that's right. It converts into a loan. You're right.
Correct. It converts to an unsubsidized loan. But here, which, I've always said the sub and the unsub have good interest rates, but here's the problem. So think about when it would convert. So let's say you've got your $16,000. Let's say you've got $16,000, $4,000 a year. You thought you wanted to be a teacher. And now you're just off doing your thing. You decide, you switch your mind, and I'm just making something up. You decide, I'm going to do finance. So now you're off doing your little thing. You're working, or, it doesn't matter. I just picked any career. So remember, you have to work 4 years of the first 8. So nothing's going to be flagged if you don't go into teaching right away, because you have 8 years to do this. So let's say you're, 8 years out and now there is an audit done by the federal government and it's determined that you have not completed your requirement to do 4 years of service. So not only do you have to pay that $16,000 back, but you have to pay it back with interest going back to the time the loan started. So it's not $16,000 anymore. It's a lot more. And we all know people change their minds a lot about what they want to do. They may even want to do teaching, go into teaching, try it for a year or two and say, I can't do this. This is not for me. And I know I got $16,000 coming, but I just can't hang for 2 more years to get my $16,000.
Wow.
So that's the downside about the Teach Grant. That's when it becomes the Teach Grown, because now, I don't know what that would be, but that may be $30,000 that you owe, maybe more with interest.
Yikes. Be serious about that thing. Y'all apply for it.
Any other Teach Grant, Teach Grown questions? You know what? I do need to say something. It was originally $4,000, but they've been actually slightly scaling it back a little bit. So do you remember how I mentioned in the book it's like $3,700 and something for the current
year? Yeah.
Yeah. So for 1920, it's $3,764, which is just $236 less dollars. It's not enough. Hey, if someone's giving you almost $3,764 for free because it's a grant, it doesn't have to be repaid. I'm taking it.
Right.
But I just want to be technically accurate. It was originally $4,000 when the law was passed. Now, as the federal government got a little strapped on the cash, they, pulled back some of the cash, but it's still a nice little chunk of change.
Yep. Still well worth it. Go teachers.
Yep.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. What's our question, Anika?
All right. So we got some bonus content this week. And Mark, we want to know, these juniors right now during COVID-19, how is the admissions process going to change for that class? Or how do you predict that admissions is going to change for this class moving into when they are getting all enrolled and stuff into college?
All right. So I'm calling this Mark's Musings because I'm engaging in some speculation and conjecture here. But I don't feel I'm going off on a deep end and throwing out anything outlandish. I actually feel pretty confident about all the things I'm going to share. It's just degrees, right? Some of them will be like very, very, very incremental change that people may not even notice, but inside the admission office, they would notice. And some of them will be a little bit more substantive. Almost every one of these changes has to do with something I've talked a lot about, especially in some of the discussions Dave and I have had in the news section. They have to do with the financial pressure that colleges are under. And pretty much all of these changes reflect that financial pressure. So there may be one or two that aren't financial related, but most of them are. So I have a lot here, Anika, and I know what it's like. We can't go one by one when I have 15, because I literally have 15. So I think what I think makes sense, we've done this before. I'm going to say, read the first 4, and then you can comment on any one of those that you want to talk about. You want to do it that way? We'll break them into 4 sections of 4.
That works.
That works?
Yep.
All right. So number 1, less college travel. So I think this is going to happen just because budgets are going to be slashed, because colleges are feeling the pinch. As one executive director said to me, Mark, as I talked to other people in this role at other schools, the question is your enrollment going to be down 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, or 25%? That's the question. Now, certainly there are schools that won't have a decrease in enrollment. But even still, those tend to be the more highly selectives. And even those schools, they tend to have large endowments, and their endowments are down. So everybody's feeling the pinch. And normally when they feel the pinch, it'll impact the budget. And for years now, probably, I can't tell you exactly how many years, Anika, but it's more than 5. Colleges have been decreasing their travel budgets. already. That's been a trend that's been happening. If you talk to a lot of college counselors around the country, they'll say that they're not seeing as many college visitors as they used to see, seeing more alumni want to come by, or maybe they have a regional rep in the area. So that's one, less college travel, budgets hit. Number two, increased online presence. So the thing, like when I go on websites right now, I see all kinds of things I never used to see. I see more live information sessions, more webinars, more chats, more student chats, more faculty opportunities to Zoom with faculty. I see just so much more of an online presence. And I see creative things that schools are doing. And I was on a session recently with a few different directors of admission. And they said, I don't know why we weren't doing this before. This makes so much sense. And we will definitely be continuing to do those things moving forward. And I'm actually excited about that because it democratizes the process, because one of the biggest gaps between well-resourced and under-resourced families is the ability to zigzag all over the country and take your third or fourth trip across the country to visit schools. And so now with them upping the online presence, it just helps a lot to level the playing field. So I expect that. This is something that's they're doing now because they have to, because people can't attend admitted student visit days and they can't visit. But I'm hearing regional level people and executive directors and just senior people, admission directors, deans of enrollment, various people, senior associates. I'm hearing them say that we will be continuing this, and why were we not doing it all along? So increased online presence, number two. Number three, we've talked about this a lot. More shoes are going to drop with the test optional movement. Continue to expect to hear more schools go test optional. And even those that don't go test optional, they're at least going to be giving lip service to the fact that test scores will not be counting as much. We understand this was a unique year. So I look for that to be number three. And after this, number four, I'm going to stop and see which one of these you want to talk about. And this is going to, I need to clarify this one because it's going to confuse some people. After a lot of thought, I think it's going to be slightly, incrementally easier to get in for the juniors than it has been the last couple of years. Now, that slightly contradicts what I said a couple of weeks ago. As what I said, might have even been last week. What I said was, as more and more students take gap years, that's going to decrease the spots in the junior class. But let me tell you why I think the opposite is going to be true now. One, gap semesters or gap years, it looked like they were going to be 15 to 25% at certainly at some of the more highly selective schools. But that number is going down now. And just let me give some background. Normally, between 2 to 4% of students take gap semesters or gap years. That's a standard number at a lot of schools. And I was thinking that looks like it's going to be more like 15 to 25. But several things have happened recently. One, we've got some new viral drugs out that look like they're at least helping decrease the chance of lethality with the states that are starting to open up now, and the colleges declaring that they're opening up, and then kids not wanting to be around their parents all the time. Like kids want to get back and be with kids. Plus, we've got colleges putting limitations for financial reasons on gaps, even that's usually not how they're spitting it. They're presenting it differently. I expect gaps to be up, but not as much as I once thought they were going to be. And I think they might go from 2 to 4% more to maybe 5 to 8%. Of course, all this could change if there's a massive COVID outbreak in the next couple of months. I'm just telling you my thinking now. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the financial pressure that colleges are under. What I believe the financial pressure is going to force colleges to do is admit more kids. Because if you are driven by tuition, or even like most schools are, and once again, if you get a nice chunk from your endowments are down. So either way, you're hit. The easiest way to fix that is to accept another 50 kids or 100 kids and maybe convert some of your doubles to triples in terms of dorm spaces. Or maybe strike up some creative arrangement with hotels in your area that are vacant and convert some of them to dorm rooms. But they're going to add more students, which is going to open up some spots. Plus, you've got more and more increasingly less kids saying they want to go to college. So Anyway, those are my first four. What are your thoughts, Anika? Talked a long time.
Let's start with that travel, because I'm thinking about all aspects of that. So I hear you say about the kids not, probably less visiting. Like, are you talking about the fly-in weekends where they're interviewing for the, scholarships and things like that?
No, I'm talking about colleges doing recruitment travel. So when they come and they do fairs or they visit your school, and meeting you on the road and school visits, like let's say like at KIPP, we normally get 140 visitors a year. Mm-hmm. We probably will, I'll be shocked if we have 140. I think those numbers will go down.
Wow. Now, but let me ask you this. I'm talking about. Okay, I get that, but do you think that the abroad programs are going to be impacted for these students, like traveling abroad? Because that takes funding.
Most likely, but it depends. You're asking me to speculate a little in the areas where I'm uncomfortable with right now, because that's going to depend where we're at with the virus.
Right.
But it's hard to believe it's going to go up.
Yeah.
I think it's, I just don't know if it's going to be down 2% or 20 or whatever. It's hard to know. And obviously this summer's shot, right? And the fall's probably shot for abroad.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely going to be down for summer, for absolutely for summer and fall.
Okay. Now, so the online presence, I get that. That makes sense. In terms of, the virtual fairs and things like that. And then I guess the classes themselves, I know we talked about this a little bit, like, which so far the kids I talk to hate the online classes because obviously, they want to be back with their, in person with their friends and stuff. So do you think they're going to try to do more online classes even with that, like,
so I think that's going to vary from school to school in terms of going there. I mean, I don't want to get too much into that because that's what we did on 118 what's this 120? 118. I know Dave and I did a deep dive on the 5 most likely options for colleges. And we went into that in like on details, like 40 minutes. But I'm talking about how I'm really focused on admissions here.
Okay.
I'm talking about, I didn't really get into.
Yeah, you're right. Got to stay in the zone.
Yeah, I really didn't get into so much how the college experience would be different. I'm talking about how the juniors will experience a different admission process.
Okay. I'm on track. Back on track. All right. And then like, for the juniors, get it, admissions, acceptance. Like that makes sense too. Like for the financial reasons alone, like get more kids in the door so we can pay the doggone bill. Yeah.
And getting more kids in the door is going to mean slightly lowering your admission standards. It just is. Like that's how you have to do it. Even at highly selectives, your acceptance rate's going to go down. Now, somebody may not feel it if it goes from like 18.1 to like 19.6, Okay. I'm not saying it's going to be so noticeable that everybody's going to really feel this. Right. I mean, look at this year. Like schools took a lot more kids off wait lists. They admitted more kids at the end when they saw the stuff was happening with COVID. All that happened, but I'm telling you, those highly selectives were still really hard to get in. Really hard to get in. Like, I mean, I have kids in pretty much all of them, but I also have extraordinary kids that didn't get in as well. So, I'm not saying this will be to such a level that everybody will like feel it on a personal level, but I'm saying if you were to actually look at the numbers, it would be evident inside the admission office. Yeah. And I think the one that to me is the most interesting on this list is schools taking more kids. Because I think in some cases it's going to be pretty significant. Because you got to get that money somehow. So anyway. Should I move on?
Yep. Next 4.
All right. Next 4. So number 5. So decreased costs. So I think you're going to see more tuition freezes and tuition resets and more creative payment options. So I don't know if you know this, Anika, but Davidson, if you're at Davidson right now, they basically told the incoming freshman class, you don't have to pay until July of 2021.
Wow.
Just to help people that are in a bind financially. So that's a creative payment option. Tuition freezes is when we're going to have a 3% increase, but now they're not. They're going to keep it the same. And tuition resets are schools that were using the high tuition discount model. They just literally lower their cost and then they have less money to dangle with merit or need-based aid.
Okay.
And because the barrier is there, like it's tough. People are afraid that they're going to get remote or online again. And, people are just looking at other options. They're looking at staying closer to home. They're looking at doing more different types of programming. And it's a very, very, very tough sell for a school to say, oh, we're going to have a 3 or 4% tuition increase. So that's number 5, more tuition freezes, resets, and creative payment options. Number 6, more focus on demonstrated interest. So because it's such a premium is going to be put on who's coming, and we got to, this sounds so crass, but get butts in the seat, then that means more tracking of the web footprint via sources like Slate, more tracking of opting into who's opting into the online opportunities to share your information, who visits, and all of the calibration that comes along with that. I think demonstrated interest is going to play a big, big role, even a bigger role than it's already played. 7 is kind of like that, early decision. We've always said early decision increase your chances of admission. I think it's going to help even more now. I was listening to a very experienced person, 33 years in the business, say he fully expects early decision applicants to be down. He said, look, they haven't been able to visit our campus in months. So are they really going to make a binding commitment to come when they probably didn't visit, or large swaths of them didn't get a chance to visit before the ED deadline? So less early decision applicants. Plus, you could also have families say, look, I don't want to commit, and then there's another COVID outbreak. I just want to see what happens. Because with early decision, you're committing in October or November, or even if it's the second round of early decision, January 1st, as opposed to committing in May or June. So those numbers are going to go down, and therefore they're going to be even more valued and prized by schools. So I expect a higher early decision acceptance rate. And then number 8 is more of a focus on need aware or need sensitive admissions as opposed to need blind. So these are all topics we've talked about before, but one of the things I've learned is I can't assume everybody's heard every single podcast, and I certainly can't assume that they've heard it, they've retained everything. You taught me that, Anika, when you're like, Mark, I can't remember all this stuff.
I continue to remind you that. Yes.
So, yes, you do. And I have to remember, like, I eat, sleep, drink, breathe this stuff 24/7. So I'm all in it, but that's not like basically nobody else is but me doing that, right? So need aware, need sensitive admissions means your ability to pay can play a role in whether you get in or not. Not just whether you get the aid award you need, but whether or not you're admitted. And I won't get all, we've talked about this a lot before. It's usually not for every applicant. It can be for the last 5%, 10%, 3%, whatever. But let's say it was a school that was just need aware, need sensitive for the last 5 or 10% of their admits. Maybe they go that way for the last 20 or 25% of their admits now. So I expect the ability to pay, and not just pay the full freight, but what schools call full pay and high pay. Applicants are going to be more priced because schools need the money to run their operation. So that's points 5, 6, 7, and 8. Anything you want to comment on there, Anika?
Well, I'm going to say, of course, my favorite one is about decreased costs and creative payment plans.
Of course.
I love that one.
Finally, some good news. And I think the way schools are going to get at that is by, once again, admitting more kids.
All right.
We'll admit more kids, but we'll charge a little less, or at least we'll keep the price where it was.
Mm-hmm. All right. Give us your next shot.
All right. So here's points 9 through 12. And there's 15 points I have. So the last batch will be a three for, not a 4-for. I made that up, by the way. I'm learning from you to just be creative, just make stuff up when you can't quite find the right word that works. Just make stuff up.
Do what you must.
Learn that from you. You know you do that.
Well, you know.
You pull out some classic Anika-isms over the year and play your best hits of Anika-isms. That would be total comedy hour for our listeners. All right, number 9. I think families will have more financial leverage if they're asking for their aid package to be reevaluated. So that gets to the point when you're in with an offer and you ask for, we've talked about this a lot recently. Last week I shared some language to use. There'll be more leverage and you're more likely to, if you do it the right way, have positive results. Number 10 more of a shift from need-based aid to merit-based aid. So we've said this before. There's only two ways a school can give money away: on the basis of need, meaning your income and your assets of the family indicate you have a need, or on the basis of merit, meaning you're bringing some skill, some talent, academic or otherwise, to the campus, and therefore we're going to incentivize you by discounting your price because we want your talents. There are only two ways to give money away. And already there's been a shift from need-based aid to merit-based aid. The lack of funds that schools have, I think, will accelerate this. There's already been a movement to target full pay families with tuition discounts so that you can get $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 out of them. And I think that's just going to be accelerated. That's number 10. Number 11 is more public out-of-state recruitment. So this has been happening for a while. We've talked about this before. Alabama, there are 43 admissions officers stationed all around the country. South Carolina is big on doing this, as are several other schools. This is dispatching reps, oftentimes who live outside the region. So if I'm in admissions and I deem that Dallas is a hot market or Houston's a hot market, then I set a regional up who lives in that area, who mines that area, and their job is to get to know as many families as possible. Why? Because out-of-state tuition is 3 times the same as in-state tuition. So we'll incentivize you with a nice $10,000, $12,000 scholarship, but meanwhile, we're getting 30 or 35 for tuition instead of 8 or 10. So more of a focus on out-of-state recruitment for financial reasons. And my last one in this batch is the growth of alternatives to the 4-year program, more badges, more certification programs, the growth of online education. Also, Career Center, more focus on internships, co-ops, and selling the ROI, look at our job placement. So some of these things are going to be multi-year trends. Most of them will be multi-year trends. But I expect them to pick up the speed. What do you think on those points 9, 10, 11, and 12, Anika?
Well, that last one, are you saying that the schools themselves, if the kid wants to go, I'm just making this up, Colgate College, are you saying that Colgate College is
Colgate University, by the way.
Colgate University would be more willing will up their online presence to say, hey, still come to us if you want to do it in an online format just because you want to do it online?
Yeah, so this has already been happening, right? In fact, when COVID broke out, I invested $1,000 in this stock called 2U. And 2U is a company that partners with about 50 colleges, mostly on the grad school level, but some of your more well-known colleges like your Ivies, your UNC Chapel Hills, those kinds of schools. And it does high quality online with them and handles all the technical aspects of it. And they actually split the money. And so colleges, they look at hey, gee, they're bringing in people that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And they're handling all the technical aspects of everything. That's just one example of the growth of online and hybrid education that's happening already out there. And so I just see that trend being accelerated. And it's not going to happen overnight. That's definitely not a 1-year thing.
Right.
But I invested in that stock because I see where the trends are going. Did I answer your question or not?
Not really, because maybe you did. I just didn't understand it. So I'm just trying to figure out, or if you're saying that the colleges themselves will have more online programs, a lot of them have online or have 1 or 2 master's programs online that people can apply to. So are you saying that they're going to have more undergraduate online programs that the student can enroll into?
I am, but I do want to state something. This is the kind of thing that probably you won't see that much next year. This one, more than almost any of the other ones, is more of a 3 to 5 year trend because colleges put a lot of time usually, and they don't just dive usually into this right away. There's committees and study and all the kinds of stuff. But yeah, definitely schools are beefing up their online offerings already. And I think that trend, this is a trend that was already, in vogue, but I just think it's going to jump to another level.
Right. And my other quick question is about the one about the public out of state recruitment.
So I know like a lot of schools have to make priority for their in-state students. So do you think that that's going to shift some, even though that they're under some kind of mandate, or will they be restricted?
That's a really, really, really good question, Anika, because this is the constant battle that we see when schools do this. You know, there's tremendous pushback because the residents are saying, I've been paying state taxes for decades, and now you're going to turn around and prioritize somebody outside of the state. And remember, you know, people, if they get upset enough, then they can vote politicians out of office and put a lot of pressure on schools. And so you've seen this seesaw teeter-totter happening in quite a few places. Like for a while, I remember when it was all but impossible to get kids into schools like UC Berkeley and UCLA if they weren't from California. And then for a while, it became almost easier because the state was struggling so much financially. They started prioritizing out-of-state students to get more money. And then there was so much blowback from the in-state residents. Now they've had to put some strict caps on out-of-state enrollment because of the political pressure. So you can only go so far with that, and you'll be voted out of office, and you'll suffer some consequences.
All right.
But the problem is states are going to have less money. And when they have less money, their options aren't that great. They can give less state appropriations to their public schools. That means that schools have to do things like salary freezes, getting rid of professors, getting rid of staff, getting rid of departments, and people don't like that alternative. Like, you know what I mean? You know, it's like no option is good. You need money.
All right.
You're either going to do things like that, or it's just like a family, Anika. If you're in a pinch, and as a family, you either need to have more revenue come in and pick up a second or third job. Now, you live in a state, Anika, that has had a very firm commitment for a long time with the whole University of North Carolina system to only take 18% of its students out of state and to take 82% in state. And did you know that applies to where you work at?
Oh, God, yeah.
You knew about that?
Yeah, from you, of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Chapel Hill. I mean, most schools it doesn't impact because they don't get that many out-of-state applicants. But of course, Chapel Hill, they get more out-of-state applicants than in-state. And where you're at, NCAT, it's hot, and they're getting a lot more out-of-state applicants. So that one's going to be interesting to follow because it's going to be a battle. And people are going to, okay, do you want us to cut teachers, cut departments, freeze salaries, get rid of staff, or we got to get money somewhere? And what I was saying is in your family, you either need to have more income come in, second job, get a raise, or you got to cut your expenses if the budget doesn't match. And it's the same for a school. So this is one way, just like accepting more kids, where you can bring more revenue in, get more out-of-state kids. So a lot of times people in state don't like it because it becomes harder for them to get in, but they also don't like the other alternatives, which is, okay, well, how about if we get rid of our philosophy department or our linguistics department or whatever? They don't like that either.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, or should I keep moving with the last three?
Time for the final three.
Final three. I see increased poaching going on. Now, we did a series on the NACAC policy changes, and now colleges no longer have to honor the fact that a student has deposited and signed a contract. They can just keep recruiting them anyway, throw money at them. It's called poaching. I think you're going to see more poaching because desperate times call for desperate measures. And if you can't pay your bills because you're not meeting your budget, then that's something that people are going to do and do more frequently. And then number 14, well, I've kind of talked about this already. More dropped courses, more tuition freezes, just the enrollment squeeze. You're going to see professors being let go, staff's spots being, furloughed, less of that, because that's the first thing that schools usually look at doing is looking at staff and faculty, especially staff positions. to when they're trying to shave some money. So they better not take your spot away over there.
Hell, did you read my little mind right there?
Yeah, I figured I did. I figured you were thinking, don't be coming after my JOB.
I came up with the 5 reasons why they need me just that fast.
Good. You better go state your value proposition. Did they create a new position for you when they hired you, or has that position been around a while?
No, it had not been around a while, but it was a person. There was one person before me.
Yeah, so it's like new in the last 10 years, maybe.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So those kinds of spots are dangerous unless you're Anika Madden with your skill set.
Hey.
You better go in there and state your 5 reasons why they need you.
I'm about to send off an email as soon as I get off this.
And say, because I work 80 hours and you pay me for 40.
35 and I work 98. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. and then the last thing is, so a lot of colleges, they have college specific questions that they ask on their application. And there's a big debate in admissions. Do you have more questions? Because what happens when you add more questions is you get more serious applicants. The people that complete are more serious about you. Or less questions. When you have less questions, people are like, oh, it's on the Common App. They don't even have any college specific questions. I mean, I had somebody tell me that yesterday. I said, you really are looking at applying it to a lot of schools. They said, oh, well, this school, and this school. They're not asking me for anything else. So it was just easy to check the box. I think what's going to happen is colleges are going to go in the direction of asking less questions because they'd rather have you in the funnel at least. And then they can try to work on reeling you in than not have you apply. So I think schools will make their applications a little bit easier. Any comments on the last ones?
No, I am curious to see that. Obviously, first I think about Y Davidson in that app. Yeah, we'll see.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I don't see them dropping that. But schools, there's schools like, look at Wake Forest application. That darn thing has about 6 or 7 additional questions.
Oof.
Be interesting to see if it continues to be as labor intensive as that.
Ooh, let's use that one as the test. Let's check in on them in a few months.
I usually like a sample size of more than one when I'm looking at something.
Well, that's enough for me to keep up with, Mark.
Yeah, I will ask admission officers, if they are looking at changing their app and making it, easier or harder. Mm-hmm. But if I was a director right now and I was one of these schools that had 3 or 4 questions, I probably would drop one question and make it just a little bit easier. Because I want people in the funnel. And basically, there's going to be a premium at getting kids to apply. And so that's a way to make it just a little bit easier. And one other thing I'll throw in, look for things like, look for schools to be a lot more flexible at application fee waivers as well. That's another thing that can make it easier. They've already been doing that the last few years. Right. I can't tell you how many students tell me, oh, I applied because they gave me a notice and said that they're waiving my fee. They're waiving my app fee. So look for that as well. So that's my list, Anika.
Yay. I think overall, juniors is looking good for you.
Well, and I'm going to say a couple things. It's these trends I don't see as 1-year trends. These things I expect to continue into the sophomore class as well. But I also think that in most cases, the change will be almost indecipherable to the applicant. It's one of these things like, let's say a school gave out 1,200 application waivers the previous year. And then this year they upped that to 1,600. That's not necessarily something that somebody's going to experience unless they're one of the extra 400 that got one.
All right.
So that's my list. Hopefully it's helpful.
It was a good one. Thank you, Mark.
All right. What you got going on this week? Besides work.
No, actually, you know what? Let me take that back. I've been doing pretty good on my personal projects. So I can say that there's one little silver lining in this virus cloud is that it's like I said, because you remember when I went to MIA, it's like focus, man. Like I gotta not be distracted.
Trust me, I know.
Gotta not be distracted. So yep.
So can you put on your list this week to reply to my text messages so I know you got them?
No promises in the text messaging.
That is my pet peeve.
Arena. Well,
that's my pet peeve because...
Well, let me tell you what my pet peeve is, though. When people say, oh, my God, like, phones are not there for you to be 24 hours accessible. Like, yeah, I get it. You respond. But people, not you, Mark. I'm just
No, you're talking about me. You can call me out.
No, seriously. I'm saying in general, like people will like text you like 2:00 in the morning. They'll text you at like 8 in the morning. It's like, I just might be in the shower. I just might be doing something else. But like this mentality of, and especially now that everybody's, oh goodness, I can't tell you the wave of mess. I mean, and I'm not complaining. I'm thankful for people reaching out and stuff like that. But it's a thing. It's like people just need to reach out and touch you whenever they want to. And that's just not right. It's just not right. I'm sorry. I'm sticking by it.
So my view is, how long does it take for someone to hit the letter K and say, K, I got it? and I had a disagreement. That's my view. You see, you're laughing because you're busted. I had this disagreement with, I'm not going to mention their name, but 20 different people participated in my book. 20 different people, whether it was copy editors or Kindle people or cover designers. Trust me, I know I had to pay 20 people. But one of the 20, whose name will not be mentioned, I had a disagreement with him on this because he was like, he did not respond when I sent him texts. And I said, I need to know you got my message. And he's like, I don't think that's a reasonable expectation on your part. So we had a big disagreement.
Yeah.
So my view is, how long does it take to hit the letter K just so I know you got it? Because what I don't want to do is badger somebody by sending it again. So that's a big hint, Miss Anika, man. And Dave, if you're listening, no, Dave's better than you, but he goes AWOL sometimes. But in fairness to Dave, well, I guess it's the same thing like you. So, he's on the road so long.
Me too.
Right now, because they got him working these killer shifts, and then he goes to Chicago.
I'm on killer shifts too.
I know. That's why it's probably both of you. But then when he goes to Chicago, he's got his wife. He's going to spend as much time as he can with her, his daughter. And then he's got these properties he owns. And I know, because I'll be on the phone with him and he constantly, put it this way, better you than me, Dave, because he's always getting a call from somebody about the plumbing's out, this happened, that happened. And I've learned from Dave that I don't want to be a landlord. Seriously. That's not my thing. I thought for a while about it, Maybe I'll get like some properties, rent them out. No, not after listening to him. But he loves it. That's his thing. Good for him.
Well, back to your question of this week, I'm going to try to consider working on my K-button skills. Okay, Mark?
See, when you laughed, you're like, I can hit one letter on my phone. Now look, I'll do my part in fairness. I'll expect what's the grace period that I should give for a response? 6 hours? 12?
12 hours.
Okay, so there we go. 12 hours and K. See how we work things out?
Love it. Partnerships
and no
are awesome.
2 a.m. texts either. You were talking about me there.
No, I got a couple more. Trust me. Goodness gracious. It's all good. I'm not responding, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. Stay safe.
You too.
So, friends, hopefully you've enjoyed the interview with Vincent Garcia. It was one of my favorite interviews that I've done. And I looked the other day, we've had over 50 interviews now on your College Bound Kid podcast. By the way, I feel like I don't say this enough. All of our interviews are archived. If you go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, you can just click the interviews tab, and you don't have to worry about listening to 4 episodes to get all of an interview. You have them all together in one audio file. And same for all of our college spotlights. They're all up there as well. So if you haven't been to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, check it out. We're always trying to upgrade it and improve it. But back to Vince. In part 4 of my interview with Vince, I asked Vince about scholarships and how do you get them at the CSU schools? And what about need-based aid? How do you get that? I also asked Vince what websites he recommends that students and parents go to if they want to learn more about the CSU schools. And I asked Vince if there's anything about the CSU schools he wants to share he hasn't discussed yet. As usual, it's the last part, so that means I put him on the hot seat. And Vince opens up with some really cool non-admissions aspects of his life, and let's just get to know him a little bit more. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Scholarships. How do scholarships work within the CSU system? Is everything need-based? Is there merit-based? How do you get merit-based? Talk to us about that.
They're primarily need-based. And so there's not a lot of scholarships unless you're applying to a campus that is trying to increase the number of or the quality of the students attending. So for instance, Long Beach, CSU Long Beach, they had a president who'd come from some prestigious other university systems outside of California who wanted to raise the quality, and so started offering merit scholarships. And often in the merit scholarships, it's both there's a financial incentive, but also, housing is put in there, research, internships, the ability to register first, which is, almost more valuable than anything but a parking sticker, maybe, in the system. So I would say that the majority of the campuses, if they do offer merit scholarships, they would be a school trying to attract stronger students. But primarily in the CSU system, most of the financial support comes based on what your financial need is.
That's great. Besides the websites, any places that you recommend, websites students go to research CSUs?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to start by looking at the CSU degree website. It will show you're interested in art history. It will show you the 10 campuses that have that. It's really important that you do the eligibility index and GPA calculator. That's also on the CSU Apply website. And then the other thing I think it's important is to actually look at the individual websites for each of the campuses, because you can find usually information in admissions that tells you like, this is our local context area. These are the neighborhoods in the local area that count, or they'll tell you what the graduation or what the acceptance rate is from certain community colleges. So if you're looking to really get into San Luis Obispo, there's a community college, I think it's Cuesta, which is right next door to San Luis Obispo, where the admit rate for engineering is almost 50%. So if I was a student who wanted to go to San Luis Obispo, but wanted to start in community college because maybe the grades aren't there, or the cost, or whatever reason, and the housing is cheap in San Luis Obispo, I'd probably go to Cuesta Community College.
Nice. That's one of those inside tips that you learn when you get that local knowledge. It's good stuff.
Yes.
Good stuff. So anything else that you haven't said about Cal State's CSUs that you want to share?
I think that, again, the biggest sort of takeaways is that you can be really successful. And the CSU system, if you're Latino, if you're interested in hospitality and tourism, you're interested in education, most of the BA degrees in California, over half are gonna come from CSU. So don't discount their value, because maybe they're not as selective as at the University of California or other independent schools. But you have to be mindful, and you have to have a plan in order that you're not there for 6 or 7 years before you graduate.
Love it. Well, Vince, you're a regular podcast listener. I'm not throwing you off now. We put all our guests on the hot seat. Peel back the onion, take off the admission phase, take off the college counseling phase, and just Vince the person. So if you had to pick another career, what would it be?
Wow. I remember this question was asked of me when I interviewed at the Point Foundation, LGBT scholarship granting organization. And I said to my boss at the time, I said, I'd be a dancer. And the look on his face, I remember.
Was it a good look or a bad look?
I think he was shocked, because I think he thought I would say, no, it was always education, or I always loved working with students, which I did, but I fell into that accidentally. But the dancing part, when I lived in Panama, I studied ballet, and I was really good. But then when I moved to the United States, that wasn't a thing that a boy could do. So I stopped. But if I could resurrect a career, it would be that.
There you go. That's the first time we've heard that. Love it. Love it. How does Vince relax when you're not working?
I'm quite an athlete. I do CrossFit. I help coach students. I am teaching in a different way, but I love a good workout.
See, you got it in your roots in that Vegas school, that athletic powerhouse. Never left you.
Well, it was funny because I didn't really utilize it there, but I think if I had known that I was good at sports, I probably would have been more involved in my high school in that way.
You've figured out late in life, I'm pretty good at this stuff.
Yes, and I love it.
What's the junk food you have a hard time resisting?
Anything sweet. Sweet.
That would be me too.
God. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like, when it starts, after daylight savings time ends and then you're in the winter, I think my body just says to itself, you got to pack on as much as you can. And then I spend, the spring and the summer trying to get it off.
This is crazy, but I like these, there's like this cinnamon candy that I really like, and it's very hard to find this particular candy. And it actually only comes out of Canada. And so I'm on this website there. I just had this craving for it. And they're like going to charge me like $35 for shipping. And so unless you spend $100, it's free shipping. And I was that close to hitting send and spending $100 on the cinnamon candy. And then I finally got a little discipline and pushed back.
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting because to me, though, what that's really saying to you is you should figure out how to make it and then sell it in the United States.
That's the entrepreneur there.
That's what would be my response. I'm going to make it myself and then sell it to other people.
Well, I can get it on Amazon, but it's like $30 for a pound. I don't want to spend $30 for a pound.
Wow. I would savor every morsel. Wow, that must be quite a treat there.
It is. Yeah, it's like called kisses, cinnamon kisses. So they're shaped like little lips, but it's like just softer. It has a different taste than any. I've always been a cinnamon person.
Yeah.
But I'll get hot tamales and they're okay, but it's not like this. It's this, it's just that one thing that is my weakness. It's my weakness, so I can so relate. What about a TV show? What's a TV show you'll like to watch to chill?
Wow, that's a great question. Recently, in January, they came out with the second season on Netflix. There's a show called Sex Education.
Mm-hmm.
It comes out of England, and it's very, both in terms of orientation and gender identity, very fluid. And so if you were a parent trying to understand the new way people are thinking about sex, I thought it was really, it's entertaining, but it's also very funny and it's poignant, and people are at all sorts of different places. But one of the great things is about the show is that there's not sort of a judgment placed on somebody who identifies maybe as asexual, somebody who's not interested in really sex at all, but is more interested in romance or not being a part of their life at all. There wouldn't be a judgment in the character displaying those characteristics.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, if you're interested in an education for your child that is interdisciplinary, discussion-based, residential, with ample interaction with faculty, one that develops critical thinking skills, writing skills, communication skills, and one that prepares you for a broad range of careers and jobs for the future, then the liberal arts may be for you. But the challenge with the liberal arts is that this is an expensive educational model. So when you're looking at the Colgates and the Middleberries and the Colbys and the Claremont McKennas and on and on and on, the Davidsons, the Amhersts, the Pomonas, the Haverfords, the Swarthmores, we're talking about schools in the $70,000 to $80,000 price range. And that's where our recommended resource of the week comes in. Our recommended resource of the week is the Council of Public Liberal Arts Colleges. Goes by, the website is coplac.org, coplac.org, dedicated to the advancement of high-quality public liberal arts education in a student-centered residential community. It was founded in 1987. There are 28 colleges, and they're from coast to coast. We did a college spotlight on UNC Asheville, but I'm talking about schools like SUNY Gnesko, Mary Washington, St. Mary's of Maryland, New College of Florida, and so many more. To learn about these colleges, just go to coplac.org. We'll put the link in the show notes. We'll now return to the final segment, my interview with Vincent Garcia. Favorite vacation spot?
Oh, vacation. Definitely New Zealand.
Oh, gee. That's one I haven't been to. Tell us about it.
So New Zealand, I would say just a diversity in climates throughout both the north and the south part of New Zealand. You feel like you've left the planet and you're on another planet. And then this uninterrupted coastline on the South Island where it looks like you're in Santa Barbara for hundreds of miles and there's just nothing there but ocean. Beautiful.
Oh, well, that sounds like my kind of place. My kind of place.
I've only been there once, but I would go back in a flash if I could.
Tell us about the best books you've read.
The best book recently that I have read is by Andrew Reynolds. And he was on Broadway in the Book of Mormon. And he was the first, one of the first two stars of that. And he talks about it being a musical theater person and moving from, I think it was Oklahoma to New York and going to a college there and talking about what that transition was like and how he made his career happen, all these moments in his life where he sort of almost gave up, but didn't, and is now a very successful, both on Broadway and has, been in several TV shows. So is now a successful actor. But the name of the book is Too Much Is Not Enough. And if you have a student who's interested in being an actor or a musical theater, they got to read it because he didn't hold back.
Wow. Good stuff. So, we got parents out there that listen and we have kids. What's your best advice for a parent and your best advice to a student, let's say, 11th grader?
Wow. Best advice for a student. Well, the student, I would say, figure out what your narrative is. What are you passionate about? What are you doing? Sort of write down all the things that you're doing and then sort of create some paths where you start to describe what it is you're passionate about. So when you apply and you say you want to be an engineer, but none of your activities and none of your classes support that narrative, you can reevaluate and say, am I really on that path? Because I don't look like it at all. But I talk a lot about developing the narrative. I think for the parents, one thing that it's really important, and because there was, so much scandal in Los Angeles and a lot of the scandal came out of a place for parents where they wanted to make their son or daughter happy.
Are you talking about Rick Singer at the scandal? Or are you talking about something else? When you
college admission scandal.
I mean, specifically the Rick Singer?
Yes.
Or just, okay.
Yes. Yeah, Rick Singer. There was so many of the clients that I have would be going to schools where there were just multiple. And I'd never heard of him at all. But for the parents, it was, you want to ask yourself, at what price is happiness that important? And secondly, once you say, oh, they're going to Northwestern or they're going to Harvard, nobody really cares. So sort of chasing that or being able to, put that on, you're like, oh, I did this parenting right by attaching it to the name of the school the child ends up at is really not the best way to manage the process, because ultimately you can go to Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton, or you can go to Pomona College. And I remember there was a college counseling reality show on for one season in the summer. And the student who won the reality show was my student.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And
when you say, was it like on Netflix? What do you mean it was on?
It was on ABC. And Peter Lloyd or Lloyd Thacker, who's at
And I'm Lloyd Thacker.
Peter Johnson, who was at Columbia.
Yeah, I served on a board with Peter before he passed away.
Yes, a remarkable, amazing, genius advocate for creating access to Columbia. But Peter was one of the judges, and Sean, who used to be at Stanford and then went to NYU, and now I think is at Temple. He was one of
he's at Temple now. He's VP of enrollment. I was just with him in Philly.
Judges. But my student was, she won the competition. But what was fascinating to watch, and I said this to her, I said, make sure you don't read the blogs, because it'll drive you crazy. She ended up choosing the most affordable selective option that she had gotten into. She got into some great universities that everyone was familiar with how amazing they were. But she ended up going to Pomona, and the backlash from people on the blogs was just brutal.
Wow.
So I think sort of remembering why you're doing something, and there's so many places out there that can make a difference. And it's really what you do with the time and the experience and the knowledge that makes the difference. You can go to a great place and still not thrive after going there if you're not taking the reins and moving forward.
That's awesome. Good advice. What would you change in college admissions if you could change any one thing, Vince?
I want to figure out how they do it in Canada, because Canadians do not get dramatic and their whole life story tied up in the process. It's just so much easier. There's a whole billion-dollar industry built around this process. And I don't think that so much time and energy and financial resources should be spent on getting in. I wish they'd spend it more on creating more access and making the process less cumbersome.
Yeah, no, that's a great ending. And you probably know I grew up there in Canada, as well as Dave, as well. It's something that the two of us talk about a lot. Like, how has Canada, been able to avoid some of all this riffraff? And, there's not this sort of hierarchical ranking mentality. There is when it comes to universities versus college, because college is there, but it's not, colleges in Canada kind of they've gotten reputations for specialization sort of more, right? So, I mean, there's no question like McGill and UT have a certain level of cachet, but like Waterloo obviously is like your MIT for engineering, and like, Guelph is like for veterinary sciences, and Western for business, and it's kind of, seen a little bit more that way, McMaster for health sciences. But listen, this has been fantastic. I think our listeners are going to love this. This is something I don't think I've shared with you, but we have 3 times as many listeners in California as the next state. So it's our biggest. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising. It's the biggest state, but you wouldn't necessarily, it's not 3 times Texas. It's not 3 times New York in terms of size.
Wow.
But yeah, California is definitely a place that our podcast has just really resonated with. And so I know there's going to be a lot of interest in your answers here. Vince, share your website in case anybody wants to, look you up and learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. You can find us at Q&A College Admissions. Just remember, when you type us into Google or Firefox or whatever you're using, there's no ampersand between the Q and the A. It's just QA College Admissions with an S.com, and you can find out more about our work.
Listen, this has really been great. Thanks so much for coming on, and just thanks for just your support of our podcast. You were one of the first ones to just kind of reach out with a real powerful email and support our work. I know you were the first college counseling organization that really reached out to us. We've had, quite a few since then, but I've certainly enjoyed our conversations both here and certainly offline, and keep doing what you're doing, because your passion for kids comes through and you're touching lives.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Mark and Anika. fantastic work, the questions, the enthusiasm, and even, the aspect of having someone who doesn't, isn't in the business, but asks the questions that parents and students are really thinking is so valuable, I think.
Well, thanks. It's just a different way of thinking, like a parent thinks like a parent, right? And
yes.
and we know our moms relate really well to Anika with all of her idiosyncrasies and uniqueness, because she's them and they're going through the process. And so I'm thankful for her and thankful for Dave, who's recently joined our team. And once again, let's keep in touch. All right. Thanks, Vince.
All right. Well, you take care.
Next week in the news, we'll be talking about a great article on legacy admissions. Our book chapter will be, How Do I Know How Much Loan Debt to Take Out for College? Our question from a listener, how do I know whether a summer college residential program will help my child get in the school, and are these programs worth the money? Our interview will be the first of a three-parter with current 12th grade student Carmen Chavez from Miami, Florida. What I did well and what I would do differently in my college process. And our college spotlight will be UMass Amherst.
You are in the emergency room. You're in New Jersey. You're in a big hospital.
Yeah.
You're just getting off a 12-hour shift, in fact.
Yes.
We worked the graveyard shift and came straight to record. What are you seeing out there?
Fortunately, I'm not seeing much. That's the problem. It's clear that COVID is dying down, and that's a great thing. But in an emergency room with almost 100 beds, we had only 3 admissions last night because the regulars are not coming in. Now, philosophically, you'd say that's
so. What's
fantastic.
your theory on why regulars aren't coming in anymore?
Oh, they're still scared of COVID. I think people have clued in that the last place they want to go is the emergency room. They may be sick, but there's people there who are sicker. And this is reinforcing a 3-month trend we've had ever since the start of the pandemic, that hospitals have seen their ED volumes plummet, their elective surgeries have been suspended, and the only thing in town is COVID. But unfortunately, the medical system depends on those elective surgeries to stay financially afloat. So you're seeing a great amount of distress with a lot of the institutions around this country. So it sounds counterintuitive and almost inhumane for an ER doc to say, we wish we had more customers, but I'm making a personal plea to all my drunken buddies out there. Come on back. I'll give you a sandwich. You can sleep all night. We miss you. But on a serious note, I think that the health profession is a proxy for the economy at large. We've taken a tremendous hit from the whole COVID virus, not just hospitals, but restaurants and airlines and the hospitality sector. And it's not reflected in the stock market because it believes that we are on the path for a V-shaped recovery. But I do believe that the economic costs of this pandemic, the wound is quite grievous. And I am hopeful we will recover, but I am realistic that this is probably going to take a significantly longer time than most people anticipate.
Yeah, we're in agreement. I mean, I was telling you, Dave, before we started today, I just saw something on television that said 40% of churches may close because people aren't giving. You cancel your services and go virtual and think people are going to be just as likely to support the ministry as they are if you're passing a plate. It's just not true. And so imagine, losing 40% of your places of worship. That's a significant blow to your culture.
Absolutely.
But let's not end on something quite as heavy.
Yeah. No problem. Lighten it up.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I just can't do another 1977, 2005 game. It's just, one thing that makes sports so amazing is the suspense.
Yes.
This is why one of my pet peeves is when I'm working. Most of the time I'm working when big games are on, so I have to DVR them.
Yeah.
And watch them, like when I'm not working, because evenings are like a prime time for me to do sessions with students and parents.
Yeah.
And so invariably, I've taped the game. I'm all excited to watch it. And, I'm a night owl, so I'll be watching like 1 a.m. or whatever. And then it just happens I check my text and then somebody says, man, what'd you think of blah, blah, blah. Now I don't even want to watch it because I know who won. Right. And so much of sports is a suspense, right? That's what makes it so interesting. And that's why I just can't do these old games because it's like, just can't do it.
Well, I heard that NASCAR, I mean, I'm not into NASCAR, but I can see cars racing around the track.
What's going on, man? NASCAR?
Well, you got to look at all, you got
Are you that desperate, man? NASCAR?
I'm desperate, man. I'm not into NASCAR. I'm not into Formula One, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So.
Okay, Dave, it's time to end this podcast when you're talking about NASCAR. I've known you my whole life. Never heard the word NASCAR come out of your. Sorry for you NASCAR lovers.
Well,
Dave's just not a NASCAR type of guy, neither am I.
I'm throwing out.
We're going to sign off now. Yeah, go get some sleep so you can work the graveyard shift tomorrow tonight, man.
Dream of my cars, my Chevys racing around the track.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Visaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Webmaster is Stallianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.